Can a driver really be penalized for gaining an advantage if the stewards themselves admit that he had no control over his car? Are we witnessing one of the FIA's most embarrassing mistakes in recent years? It all began in a setting charged with tension, the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. A circuit defined by its extreme altitude, tight corners, and a recent history filled with controversial decisions. But what happened this time was not a mere misinterpretation, nor a questionable on-track battle. What unfolded was a direct blow to the very integrity of Formula One sporting judgment. Lewis Hamilton, locked in a fierce duel with Max Verstappen, faced one of the most challenging moments of the Grand Prix, breaking into turn 4. Both drivers pushed to the absolute limit, one attacking, the other defending. And in that razor-thin margin of tension, everything happened. Hamilton locked up under braking, overshot the corner, and was forced down the alternative route, an escape not planned but inevitable. There was no time to react, no room for another choice. It was an instinctive response to a critical moment. Up to that point, it could have been seen as a simple driving error under pressure. But the real storm began when the FIA stewards' official documents were released, and that's when the case exploded. Document 37, signed and sealed by the FIA, bluntly states that Hamilton had a fully justifiable reason for not following the escape path dictated by the race director. It explicitly explains that his car was traveling too fast due to a brake lockup, making it physically impossible to turn and comply with the protocol. In other words, the FIA itself acknowledged that Hamilton acted in good faith under a purely technical limitation. At that moment, it seemed the case was closed, no further action required, as the document clearly mentioned. However, in a move that defies any regulatory logic, another report, Document 36, released in parallel, imposed a 10-second penalty on Hamilton for having gained a lasting advantage outside track limits. The contradiction is so blatant it borders on absurdity. How can the same governing body issue two diametrically opposed rulings, on the same event, for the same action, involving the same driver? But this is not merely a clerical inconsistency. This contradiction calls into question the entire logical foundation behind Formula One sporting penalties. If one document states that Hamilton could not be expected to follow the proper route because it was beyond his control, and another punishes him for not relinquishing the position gained in that exact same sequence, then the structure of regulatory interpretation has collapsed upon itself. And the most concerning part? We are not talking about subjective judgment calls or debatable camera angles. We are talking about official, signed FIA documents, issued by the same authority, in the same race, regarding the same maneuver. The implicit admission of error is there, buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. What should have been an objective, technical assessment has turned into an exercise in regulatory contradiction, one that has set the entire Formula One community on edge. The core of the problem lies in the ambiguity of the term, lasting advantage. This phrase, so frequently used in FIA regulations, is meant to punish drivers who leave the track and gain a clear, measurable benefit in position or time without yielding it back. But what happens when that advantage was neither intentional nor voluntary? Should the same regulatory weight apply when the incident stems from an unavoidable technical failure? This is where analysts start to diverge. Some argue that the FIA cannot judge intentions, only observable facts. From their perspective, if Hamilton overtook Verstappen off the track and did not give the position back, the penalty is justified, regardless of whether it was physically possible to avoid. Sports justice, under this logic, must remain blind to context. But another group of experts, including former commissioners and retired drivers, holds the opposite view. Context does matter. In this case, the advantage resulted from a brake lock caused by specific technical conditions, high-altitude overheating of the discs, reduced grip, and the pressure of racing. This combination, they argue, should be interpreted as a forced, unavoidable action, not a punishable one. What is truly at stake is not Hamilton's position in the race. It is the precedent that will govern all future maneuvers involving unforced errors or sudden actions beyond a driver's control. If it becomes established that an action can be sanctioned even when stewards recognize it was unintentional, the door opens to penalizing incidents solely based on visible consequences, not on their underlying cause. Formula One regulations have always been a delicate balance between letter and spirit. Rules are written to be interpreted judiciously, adapted to context, and applied consistently. What happened in Mexico 2025 shattered that balance. The FIA acknowledged the context, understood it fully, and yet chose to ignore it, applying a mechanical, almost robotic sanction. That decision has sent a wave of concern through the teams. If stewards can impose penalties while admitting that technical conditions made compliance impossible, who can guarantee that the next sanction won't be even more absurd, arbitrary, or detrimental to the integrity of the sport? Moreover, this debate does not happen in a vacuum. It comes amid a season already marked by controversial rule changes, contentious technical decisions, and a fierce championship battle among multiple teams. Every point counts. Every steward's decision can alter the fate of races, drivers, and constructors. This is not just about sporting justice, it is about competitive legitimacy. And if legitimacy starts to crumble within the regulations themselves, the damage runs far deeper than the numbers on a results sheet. The difference between opinion and proof lies in the data. And in Hamilton's case at the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix, the telemetry is devastating. Not only does it confirm that the driver did not have full control of his car during the maneuver, it also exposes the weakness of the FIA's argument for the penalty. In Formula One, telemetry is not assumption or impression. It is precise data collected directly from the car's sensors: braking force, pedal pressure, steering angle, speed, weight transfer, brake temperature, and instantaneous tire grip. Captured to the millisecond, this data does not lie. Hamilton's key lap reveals late braking and a total front-wheel lockup caused by a combination of environmental and technical factors that make the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez notoriously hostile. At more than 2,200 meters above sea level, reduced air density affects two critical variables: brake cooling and downforce. With less oxygen, brakes operate at higher temperatures, drastically reducing cooling efficiency. As discs and pads heat, the risk of losing braking sensitivity and inducing lockup skyrockets. Meanwhile, the lower aerodynamic load on the front axle further compromises the car's ability to remain planted through the corner. In these conditions, Hamilton entered turn 4 fighting not just Verstappen, but physics itself. When the brakes are applied, the wheels lock, the car fails to respond, and the trajectory becomes straight and uncontrollable. Even perfect reflexes cannot correct it. The steering wheel moves, the driver reacts, but the car does not obey. The escape route is not a choice, it is the only option. And the most critical fact: this sequence is recorded. Sensors pinpoint the exact moment the car ceases to respond. There is no adjustment, no tension clipping, only a mechanical struggle against a car that has exceeded its grip limit. Furthermore, an analysis of the total time of the maneuver reinforces the idea that Hamilton did not gain a structural advantage. Although he overtook Verstappen in the process, the overall sector time was nearly identical to his previous laps. There was no real-time gain that could translate into a sustainable competitive edge. In other words, the gain was positional, not strategic, and that distinction is crucial. This was not just a simple racing incident. Nor was it merely a controversial duel between two elite drivers. It was, rather, a moment of institutional rupture, an episode that exposed a fissure long forming within Formula One's regulatory framework. The case of Lewis Hamilton in Mexico 2025 will be remembered as more than a disputed sanction. It will be remembered as the exact moment when the regulations and their application collided head-on with the technical reality of the sport. Because when the very body that dictates the rules admits in writing that a driver acted justifiably, yet simultaneously punishes him for the same action, the logic underpinning the entire sporting system is compromised. And this is not an isolated problem. It is the crystallization of a crisis of confidence brewing for years: inconsistent rulings, shifting criteria depending on the circuit or the panel of stewards, penalties issued without clear public explanation, and now even official documents that contradict each other within the same race. All of this has created a climate of skepticism, both inside and outside the paddock, that the FIA can no longer ignore. The stakes are even higher now. And while the championship may not hang in the balance, something even more important is at risk: the legitimacy of every future outcome. If the racing community begins to believe that results can be determined by incoherent or contradictory decisions, Formula One will no longer be a sport. It will become a scripted show, a story without internal consistency. The Hamilton case is not just about whether he should have returned the position to Verstappen. It is about whether Formula One can continue to function under a regulatory system that contradicts its own technical logic. It is about whether on-track decisions will be guided by subjective interpretation or by objective technical principles. And above all, it is about whether the drivers, those who risk their lives lap after lap, can fully trust the judgment of those who govern them. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this.